Hi, Chris. Thanks for coming on the podcast today. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah,
Uh,
weather's weather might be getting cycle riding later. Weather seems to be better today.
I think we've had an absolutely phenomenal summer in terms of weather. Like, I know it's been a bit strange being locked in, but we can't complain about the sun, can we?
No, no, no.
Although we have had the rain recently, but as the oldies would say, we needed it.
You
Well,
included me in the oldies now, aren't you?
I never thought that for a second. That's why I said that's why I refer to as another people,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
us youngsters, we don't talk like that. I was excited to get you back onto the show though, because I know you back in the days when I used to do a lot of networking, a lot of breakfast networking, and I know back then you had a lot of opinions on how you can get networking a lot better and open up
Mm.
bigger and more important conversations, which ultimately is going to be the theme, hopefully, of this podcast. You've got a very clear view of how you believe the integration of the generations, you call it, but I was about to say a clear view of how the generations can work together more effectively, because just purely by when we were born, we've got completely different experiences, we've got completely different world views, we've adopted different values, and different qualities. And we often look at the other generations differently, as in the younger generation may look at the older generation and go, well, I'm not going to do what they did. And then the older generation may look at the youngsters and go, God, they wouldn't have lasted a day in our world. Yet the truth of the matter is, there's nothing wrong with the generations. However, there seems to be a lot lost in translation. I don't know how to build those bridges, but I know that you've thought about this long and hard, and you've got some good ideas of how it can all come together.
Yeah, it's this generation things. I mean, because I'm now in the bracket, which is, I
About
suppose, I
25
just.
to 26.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, yeah. The money's in the post. Um, as I grew up, I suffered, if you a little bit at the hands of my father, who was trying to dictate to me how I should be and what I should be doing, and yeah, the world had changed since my father had was a young man and was raising a family. And of course, he was now in his sort of 60s, was now trying to tell me to do what he was doing. And I said to him, look, I know, I know you've got some great advice and stuff that you want me to take on board. But to be absolutely frank, at the age of 30, I've had more life experience than you've had at 60 because I was being divorced. He never got divorced. I've been around the world working in business around the world. He'd never done that. I got lots of experience that he'd never had. And whereas I was very respectful for what he was doing, because he only wanted the best for me, I had to say, if I do what you do, I'm going to be working in a factory in Watford, sitting here with my Jack the Rippers, as I called them, slippers on, like watching TV, and that's not what I want. So you have to respect the fact that I'm going to make my own way and I'm going to find my own path. And now I've grown. I'm actually a grandfather. You didn't know. You probably didn't know that. That was the
Oh,
curve.
wow. No, I didn't know that.
So my oldest grandchild is 16. So
Yeah, that surprised me, to be honest. Like, I knew
yeah,
you as a father. I knew you had a family. I didn't
yeah,
realise you had teenage grandchildren.
yeah, and of course, so now I'm able to look at, not necessarily because I talk to them an awful lot, because I don't, but my daughter obviously does, and my son sees them a lot. So not only am I communicating with my own kids, I'm also hearing how the younger generation are seeing the world. And so I've got the ability now to see all three generations, not with the utmost of clarity, but certainly I've got a good feeling for what they're going through. And if you look at, like, we've all absolutely got amazing resources at our disposal. And, this world we're in, at the moment, we've got the world being controlled by what I would call the baby boomer generation. They're the generation that I'm just scraping into, but they're up till the age of sort of 1960, 1962. For that kind of, before that, they're sort of classed as baby boomers. and they're all running the companies. They're all the ones in government and stuff like this, and they're the ones that followed the previous generation's instruction, but they had all the benefits of a kind of almost clean sheet which was created by the wars. So they were able to just go out, work hard, build stuff, earn money, invest it, because it was all new. And of course, they created what we've got today. And I'm not proud of what we've created because it's a mess. And we've got a mess. And the mess is we've got an inflated global finance system, which is, to be honest, I don't know whether the last count, 70 trillion in debt or something on a global scale. It's a number which is beyond comprehension. And every country's broke, and every country is owing other countries that are also broke. It's got, there has to be a day of reckoning because it's a mess, and it's not sustainable. So all this money that's been generated, that's wafting around in pensions, is not necessarily secure and safe where it is. So although my generation are sitting there looking at nice pension pots and all this, that could disappear in the pointing of a mouse click on a spreadsheet, and suddenly
that's a frightening fact. But
yeah,
we all know you're right, because we've seen evidence of it. We've heard stories about it. And there's a lot of opinions going around about it. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And when you look at that older generation who almost can say, "Well, I'm all right, Jack," that's a potential way of looking at it. And pointing to your generation and saying, well, all you got to do is go out and work hard like I did. That's it. Work hard. You haven't got enough money. Well, work harder then. And the younger generation, and you can vouch for it.
Yeah.
Like, can't afford to buy a house. 2 people working, no time to spend with the kids, or it's pretty tough going. So the kids aren't getting what they need. The parents are running around like blue-ass flies, and there's still not enough money to do what your parents were doing. So there is this massive difference in the way the world looks for massive difference in the way the world looks to both generations. And I think it's kind of much more wider, that gap, than it was, if you like, when I was looking at my dad, because there was still an opportunity to go and get a job in a factory if I wanted to. That still existed. Houses were still at a price which I could afford with probably 2 years of my salary. Today you're looking at, I don't know, 15 years or something, or 10 years salary before you to buy the kind of house that you want. So even at my age, it was still manageable. But today we've got this massive discrepancy. And of course, the older generation have no desire to change it because they're okay, aren't they? I mean, why would I change? Why would I change something that's going to be okay for me? 3 or 4 holidays a year, not bad. Sitting there, do what I want, free time, just coasting into like older life. It's quite nice, good thing. Yeah, that's what we were promised, and that's what we're going to get. But unfortunately, if what we're talking about, the financial meltdown, happens, that isn't going to happen. And a lot of the money that's in equity in properties or in pensions is going to need to be spent on their old age health, because health won't be free. There's too many people for it to be free, and maybe the pensions will disappear. So you're going to have to use that money to actually survive. And guess where else they might look? Their kids, right? So this is where the relationship with your children is really, really important. And I can speak about my son, because my son he's 30, and he's woken up to the fact. He said, we were told, this is what we were told. We were told, go to school, work hard, get exams. If you can go to university, go. Okay, you get a bit of debt, but you can pay that off if and when, type of thing. Then you go and get a job, and then you earn money, you save, and you buy a house, and then you find a girlfriend, and you get married, you have kids, and then you just sort of work hard, and you sort of bring up that family, and then you get to 60, 65, and then you can kind of retire on what you've done, and everything's rosy. And if you're lucky, you've got 10 years or so left to enjoy the proceeds of your life. Except it's not quite like that anymore. And who made that story up anyway? That's what I say. It's like, who decided that was how it should be?
I know it's hard. I've had similar conversations with my dad, because my dad, he's a 50s baby, and he'd probably count as, the baby boomer
Yeah.
generation. And my dad, he's a loving dad, he's a great dad, and he's always wanted the best for me. But I've had similar conversations with him where I'm like, well, we live in different worlds, Pops. I mean? Like, we're not the same. Because, without being unfair to his generation, they had a relatively minor jobs. I feel like I work extremely hard, and I feel like I've done really well for myself having gone through uni, and I feel like I've got a fraction of the success he had just from leaving school and getting a basic labour job, working in a basic factory, working in basic supermarkets. And he did train up to become an engineer, and he'd be going around working in kitchens and things. But I found that when I spoke to him, what I don't think they fathom in terms of how much the whole workplace has changed is, you used to be able to get a job for life, man and boy. Like, if you were good on the tools, you had a good trade, or you worked in a family business, or you worked in a factory, you kind of hear a lot of stories that they went in at 16, 17, sometimes 15, because both my parents left school at 14, 15, and they get a job. 20, 30, 40 years later, they'd still be there, building up a pension. And even though it was relatively, like, I don't want to talk down jobs because that's not fair. Even though it was relatively like run-of-the-mill jobs, they were easily finding mortgages, easily paying the mortgages, easily owning their homes by the time they were 50s, 60s. The home by that point had like 10 times, 20 times in value, some like ridiculous leverage number. And then at 60, 65, they would turn and say, oh, well, I've worked hard for this. I deserve my retirement. It's my right to go cruising around the world. And the younger generation, well, you play your cards right, you'll get your turn. And the conversation I used to have with my dad was, well, I'm never going to get my turn. But that's not the life, that's not the path that we've got ahead of us. We couldn't have the same opportunity to get a house at that kind of price and see that kind of growth. So if we are able to afford to get on the ladder, I can't see it 10x in the next 20, 30 years. I can't see the property surging to that level, because then, if you imagine their net worths in relative terms are massive compared to what our generations can understand how to achieve, if that makes sense. And again, I'm a 40-year-old guy, or 41. So it's not like I'm a youngster. I do think it's getting worse. And I do think there's generations below me that've got it even harder. But when we get to this age of 65 or whatever it is, I already know for a fact that the option to retire won't be there. And I know, and I'm 25 years away from that point. And you're imagining, we're talking at the moment about people leaving school this year. Well, where's their head at? Where's their mindset at? And if I'm thinking that I've got no chance of retiring in 25 years, yet when I have this conversation with the baby boom generation, it's, well, I earned it. It's my right.
Yeah,
and I don't want to knock it, because if I was in their shoes and I'd worked hard and I'd done what they'd done, I'd be pretty keen to retire at 65 as well. But then there has to be some sort of, and this is, I think, what you're kind of getting at, there has to be some way the generations work together and understand each other better, I think.
Yeah, it's just to finish off that point, when my dad bought his 3-bedroom house not far from where they've now got Harry Potter Studios, it was he bought it for £2,750, and we just sold it because my mother died 2 years ago, so we just sold it for £500,000.
Wow.
Now, yeah, don't tell me that opportunity exists. Don't tell me that opportunity exists.
The greatest investment ever.
Yeah, anywhere again, because it doesn't. We are at the end of that cycle of bubble, and all we can look forward to is it blowing up, basically, which brings us on quite nicely to where do we go next? What is likely to happen here on in? Well, it is a bit of a reset. So the good news is that things are going to get much more calmer, and they're going to be much more localized and everything else, and people are going to need to look to other people to help and support them, because it's not a question of, well, just buy it. It's like, well, I haven't got the money to buy it. Okay, well, how can I get this done without the money then? Well, you just enlist other people to help you. Like when my granddad had his garage built, he didn't have the money to build a garage, so he begged, stealed and borrowed the breeze blocks and some wood and stuff. And my dad and his brother went round there with a guy who knew how, who was a bit of an architect type bloke, and they built the blooming thing in about 3 months just on weekends. But he had a garage suddenly, so it was a lot more community centric. Now we're in this period of time where, dare I say it, we are going to have to get used to not being able to go and do the things we were doing. So times of going out eating, going out drinking, going around the world, yeah, all these things will be curtailed. But we need to stop buying things because everyone's got enough stuff. Everyone has got enough stuff. I mean, I remember being in a meeting once, and it was like a meeting about earning more money. It was one of these sort of presentation evenings. And the guy goes, yeah, who's got a TV? And everyone's like, puts their hand up, and he says, right. He says, how come all these TV shops are selling TVs then if everyone's already got one?
It's true though, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's never
like,
enough.
Never enough, exactly. So everyone keeps buying new stuff. Well, actually, we've all got enough stuff. And I think this pandemic has basically showed us that actually we don't need to go out to the shops and keep buying new stuff. We've all got enough stuff. We just want new stuff, better stuff, different stuff that fits in with the colour we want the room to be, stuff. Yeah, we all just want more stuff. And actually, we've been sold this idea of more stuff. But to sustain this planet, we need to stop doing that. We have to stop doing it. It's not viable in the long run. And of course, that will be forced upon us because there'll be job problems and there'll be money earning problems, which we can already see. John Lewis not reopening in Watford. Lots of things happening now, which is job losses. And people don't say, oh, they'll just appear in other ways. They won't. They won't appear in other ways because society has to contract, because this bubble is going to burst. And, I've often been told that I'm a bit arrogant by saying certain things as if they're already fact. But all I do is look at trends. I look at trends and I see what's happening in the world. And, as countries lock down, they can't ship stuff around the world. People worried about where their next pound's coming from. They're not buying as much. Then the economies contract, retail falls apart. What we're seeing at the moment, retail falling apart. It's not rocket science. People don't spend, then retail collapses. It's just the way it is. Then eating out starts to be a problem because the people who are working in these retail stores have not got the money. So John Lewis closing, which is a big draw for Watford. Then what happens? Well, people stop going to the restaurants because it was the people going to John Lewis that were going to the restaurants. Now they're not coming for John Lewis. They're not going to go to the restaurant. So the knock-on effect is huge. And of course, if the baby boomer generation loses a vast amount of its own wealth and house prices crash, then we see a different perspective on the way the world looks. Now, from your generation's perspective, you've been taught to work hard, go to work, do all the things that we did. Not your fault. You were sold that dream. And of course, the dream looks like it's about to collapse into a pile on the floor because of what's happening now. And you can see it. You're an intelligent guy. You can see what's going on. It's like, hang on a minute. Maybe what I've been doing was all for no avail anyway. And this is kind of where my son's got to. It's like, what on earth am I doing? Going to work, working hard, getting paid on a job just over broke, just as I can carry on living. And their company, the guys who are running the company are creaming off the top. You can give it a polite name, profit, but it's creaming off the top of the labour of other people that are working there. And they're all your generation or younger. And they're turning around and saying, well, hang on, there must be more to life than this.
Yeah, what's all this about? Yeah.
And they've got huge skills. They can turn an idea into a deliverable using technology, which is what you do for a living, or what you're part of, right? So they want to get a group together, WhatsApp, a few messages around, and suddenly you got 50 people in a group, right? Now, my generation, I can do it, but my generation don't do that. They don't know what you're talking about. They have no idea really, unless they're really up to speed on technology. They wouldn't even know what you're talking about. Snapchat, what's that? Like TikTok, what's going on? I thought that was a clock. The clock made that noise, and it's they don't know those things. Some of them do, by the way. I'm not denigrating the ones that do, but as a percentage, it's a lot less. So your generation can take an idea and turn it into a reality using technology, and you can go and get people to join in because you've been communicating with them in small groups anyhow. So your group is an enabling generation. But you don't necessarily have the ideas. And the reason you don't probably have all the ideas is because you were already convinced about the viability of what we taught you, and consequently you've got a lot of baggage. You get the younger generation, the ones coming out of school now, they don't have any baggage. They've had the creativity and problem solving knocked out of them by school, because school does that to people. But some of them will still retain their ambition to innovate something which has got possibly humanitarian function, like making water out of saline solution easily at no cost, using no energy, so it can be taken anywhere in the world. Stuff like that. I know that's already invented, but I mean that type of thing. So you get their generation don't know what they can't do. Haven't been told you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that as much as your generation. So they might come up with some really good ideas, but your generation needs to bring the people together who can produce or deliver on that idea with a much less profit motive driven reason for doing it, more of a reason I feel good doing this because it's going to benefit millions of people. And of course there's going to be some in that middle generation that are going to be still based on the older generation's premise, and they need to be there because the wheels of industry must keep going. We can't just suddenly all down tools, because it'd be just disaster, it'd be chaos. So what we're approaching now is the managed contraction of society in a way where, yes, it's going to be painful, yes, it's going to be hard, but we can get to the end game, which is where expectations are a lot lower, but everyone's more happy because there's less stress, less rushing around, less doing all this stuff. So the younger generation, ideas factory. The middle generation can turn those ideas into reality because they've already been working with the tools in industry already. And the older generation, their contribution, there's a lot less of these people although there's a lot of them, there's a lot less of them that feel inclined to support and help because they don't understand why they should, and they're okay, thank you very much. But that generation can provide resources, buildings, finance, even wisdom of the years, or some kind of knowledge about business, and connections, because they've got lots of people they know, so they can bring in people. If they can't do it, they could bring people in with teams of people who could possibly turn this into a reality, who can then work with the younger ones. And the idea comes from the even younger group of people because they don't have boundaries about what they can and can't do. So they just come up with an idea out of nowhere, have no idea if it could work or not, but it's not their job to worry about that. It's their job to just generate all these ideas, and some of them will work, won't they?
Well, I'm a bit like you because you mentioned that you don't quite fit into the baby boomer world. Well, I'm kind of just pre-millennial myself.
Yeah.
So while we know their stereotypes and their generalizations, there definitely is trends in the different generations. Like, I know whenever you mention it, people go, oh, well, I'm not like most millennials, or I'm not like most Generation X. And, well, I don't fit into the baby boomer mold. But it's very clear that there are generalizations and stereotypes, and you can see the boundaries. And I know, being just outside the millennials, I've kind of got my feet in both worlds, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Because the younger generations think I'm completely old school, and I'm kind of not. I'm not old school. I don't know what it's like to grow up in the 50s and 60s. And I know exactly that a lot happened between the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s when I grew up. Yet sometimes I was there the other day and I was describing the 90s, and I think I might as well have described the Victorian era. People are, it just seems so long ago, and it's just relative, isn't it? But what I've definitely noticed, though, is not just in terms of sort of ideas and talent and ability, but there's the old-fashioned values, I suppose, rules, which people are kind of stuck in. And what I found with the baby boomer generation is they're very hot on, you've got to do your apprenticeship, you've got to go up through the levels, you've got to follow a linear path. You work the shop floor, then you're a team leader, then maybe you'll be a supervisor, then maybe you'll be a deputy manager. They don't, and I do struggle sometimes when I'm trying to explain things with them, with the mindset, because they're like, well, no, you can't just jump places. You can't create your own little renegade group of ideas. You've got to go through the process. Now, my experience of seeing the youngsters come through, the only negative I can see with the youngsters is a lot of them are disheartened. They're very much struggling.
How would I be?
And I can totally understand. So the only thing the only negative I can say on the younger generations is they can be very disheartened, and they can come across very apathetic, because it's like, why, and that's the only negative I can see. But having worked in London, for the most part of the last decade, the talent coming through is phenomenal, and I don't think we fully appreciate just how much value is in these youngsters. I think they get a bad rep, and a bit like what you're saying about the ideas and the lack of limitations. But it's not just ideas. Like the coding abilities that are coming together now, the engineering abilities, they're actually delivering on these ideas. They have an idea of how they can. And I use the example of taking the saline out of water, but they have these ideas, and they're like, well, that can be done, and they're on it, and they are doing these things. These things are happening,
and they can build groups of people around the world. They don't even have to be like searching for people. There's like, who's interested in doing this, and they get a load of people say, yeah, I could get involved in that. Yeah, I know someone who's done this.
Absolutely. And my experience, and this is obviously on a general level, that they seem to be less bothered about status and hierarchy. They're more bothered about, well, what can we do? Who can be empowered by it? They're very weirdly, being a technical world, when they're all sort of, blamed for being on screens and sort of interconnected through devices, they are very social, the younger generations, and they are actually interconnected, even though they're on screens a lot. They're reaching out to each other. They're finding like-minded people, even if it's sort of, in out the back of Kathmandu and the Outer Hebrides. If there's someone with a similar idea to them and trying to achieve a similar fit, they're finding these people, and they're building these little pockets of groups. So they are more connected. And I'm not just talking about, just, followers on Instagram. That these people are building those relationships. And I do think it's that paradigm difference where I'm seeing them kind of kept down a little bit by, well, you haven't earned your stripes yet to rise up and have a crack at that project. You've got to work on shop floor first. But there isn't really a place on shop floor for that level of creativity. And it'd be ridiculous to put a lid on it.
And you're right, but you're talking about big companies there, and of course, the future for big companies is limited. The future for companies that are huge, your Googles, your Jeff Bezos and Amazon and people like this. They've already created this space, Microsoft and all this, where they're vast and they are huge beyond anything that a small individual could create. And of course, they hoover up a lot of expertise. But what we've got here, and you're right, these youngsters, and I know from these grandkids, they're like, they want to earn a bit of money, but the driver for them is much more to do with they've experienced probably not being happy. They've seen the fact that there's not a lot to look forward to. It's like, well, everything's already been done, kind of thing. So where do I fit into this? And like, it's no point in me getting a job, is there? Because like, what can I do with a job? Like, I earn a bit of money, but I got no chance of buying a house. Got no chance. So what's the point of even going there? Like I can.
Yeah, and I can relate to that, but that is what's happening.
Yeah, and so consequently, there's a lot of apathy. But it's not. And I was talking to my lad about this, and he said, out the generation, that generation, and even his generation, 30, get lambasted and told they're lazy.
Yeah.
And I said, no one decides to be lazy. I think people are not inspired, but I don't think they make a decision to be lazy.
No, and I don't think most of the time it actually is laziness. I think people are just looking at it with different filters of what is the right thing to do. Like the baby boomer generation, they're almost a bit like military of like, you've got to be on time, you've got to be done this, you've got to have your tie straight, you got all these sort of like things that they expect the youngsters to do, which are completely irrelevant to whether or not they've got any talent and can do their job, and irrelevant to actually getting the job done, if that makes sense. And then you'll see someone come in and they're like, well, I didn't feel like I need a suit. I'm perfectly happy in jeans and t-shirt and I can do the job. And it's right, they can do the job in jeans and t-shirt, but there is still that generational thing of, oh, too lazy to get dressed, eh? I mean, like,
not dressed for work.
Yeah, and well, they're sloppy with their dress, they're sloppy with their mind. That sloppiness will come out in other areas, and it gets judged as a lack of discipline. And then the laziness comes up, as you've said, and I've heard it many a time. And personally, I don't think it's accurate.
No, it's not.
because I see them as a very hard working generation, very, very much when they're onto something, they're hot on it. Although, if they're on a crap project, yeah, they can be very disheartened, very much like, this ain't my bag. Very open about the fact that this isn't really sort of, getting me going.
You know,
You
I
can't be
was,
wrong for that.
and I mean, I know that laziness not. I mean, when I was at school, every single report I got was Chris just does enough to get by. Right, just enough to get by, and that's because I wasn't really interested, but I was interested enough to pass the exams, right? Because I knew that that was important, right? But I wasn't going to sacrifice playing table tennis every night because I like playing table tennis, working at the weekends and playing county for table tennis for the county. I wasn't going to sacrifice that for 10 points more percentage points on my grades. 60% was all right for me. I was okay. And then they go, oh, you won't get to university. It's like, great, because I don't want to go anyway. No, but when you translate that to your working life, in 2000, I started a project writing a SAP type system for the internet. Then one didn't exist; it was pioneering. That nobody had ever done it before. So I went off and started writing it. Now you couldn't stop me working. I was working 20 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week for 4 years.
Yeah,
right, because I was excited about the project. Now, if you take anybody and you get them on their project that they're excited about, they won't be lazy. They
far
won't
from it.
be far from it. They will work until they destroy themselves because they're so excited about what they're doing. I've seen it time and time again. That if people are inspired, they'll do anything and everything to keep on going doing that thing. They end up becoming workaholics if they're that kind. But they also, the younger generation, I think what happens with the younger generation is that they say, well, do you know what? I've worked enough today. I'm going to go and hang out with my mates. I'm going to go play some games. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, you haven't finished your project. No, but I've done enough for today. I've worked hard. I think they've got an inbuilt balance,
Yeah.
which other generations don't have.
Well,
It's
I think they ask deeper questions. Like you say, they go, "Why are we doing this?
yeah,
And that's part of the disheartenedness, and the apathy. It's like, well, why? Because as you say, if they don't get to do an inspiring project, they'll learn all this talent, all this skill, all this knowledge, and they'll go to the workforce and it'll be like, well, what are we doing today? Well, today we're going to build a better TV so people get rid of their old, want to buy a new one. And obviously the younger generation's like, why? Oh, because that's how money works. We get them to get rid of the old phone and get a new one by making a better one. So your project today is to make a better one. And even though it takes a lot of expertise to sort of, make these things better, there does seem to be that generational thing of, well, why? Well, isn't there something better we could be doing?
Yeah.
And
Something that's more serving to the human race.
yeah, and it's quite refreshing to see how young these people are asking those questions, because sometimes they catch me out. They'll be like, have you ever thought about why? And you think, yeah, you got me there, mate. That's actually quite a good question. And I don't think, and I don't want to knock the older generations, even my generation, I don't think a lot of us always thought that way. We're so busy being busy.
Yeah, that's what we've always done. Yeah, but why? Yeah. Now, when you re-look at it, and you say, hang on, the world's changed here, and we're still doing the same old rubbish. We need to be working on this and changing it. So I think if you and really, the reason we know each other is through a thing that was started in 2011, which is a thing called Link for Growth. And the purpose of Link for Growth was to bring people together to have conversations. Now, you could say it was a bit ahead of its time, because really the only reason why we've suddenly started to see the importance of having conversations is because a lot of people are sick. A lot of people have got mental health issues which need to be discussed and talked about, because that's the only way you can get through them, is to air them and to be able to be with compassionate and empathetic people. But also we've got to rebuild, because there's no point in looking at the old understandings, because you can't create new with old knowledge. We've got to innovate some new knowledge, things that we don't know have got to come from somewhere, from some level of inspiration, because I think it was Einstein who said you can't create new things with old thinking. You've got to have new thinking to create new things. So we're now in a situation, and conversations happen when you get 3, 4, 5 people together. You don't just get 3 or 4 or 5 brains, you get the brains plus some kind of synergistic contribution which comes from people working together in a small group or talking together in a small group. So it's not just the sum of the brains, it's the sum of the brains plus one. And I think that plus one is where you get this new thinking, because it's when those people come together. So conversations are absolutely important. Now, back in 2011, 2012, people just saw that as free networking. So it's doing the same stuff, you just have to pay for it. But actually missing the point. It wasn't really about that. But then again, possibly we needed to do an apprenticeship in what, and evolve the idea such that when the time was needed, it had already gone through all those trials and tribulations so that it was ready and fit for purpose. And I believe that's where we are. But it's going to need people coming together across generational boundaries, putting down their reservations at the doorstep, going in and being open and honest, and seeing what each of them can contribute and bring to the party. And I think then, and only then, we can co-create something which is way, way different to what we've got now. Because what we've got now doesn't work for the majority. It only works for a small number of people.
Yeah, I remember, because you founded Link for Growth,
Yeah.
didn't you? And I remember that sort of era, like it's another networking group, like an extension of your BNIs and your 4Ns. And the misconception, I guess, of networking is, well, what's the ROI on it? How many leads do I get? I'm going there for a bit of business, you know, and it's a case of, well, let's all get in a circle, we'll do a round robin, and we'll each hear each other's pitch, you know, and then we can pitch to each other. And maybe I'm not pitching to you, but you know someone I could pitch to. Who's your mates who would appreciate my pitch? But I remember what you was more hot on, and it's why you say Link for Growth. And it's much bigger than growth of business. And I know, having known you and know what you're trying to achieve, there's almost like layers to the conversations that you're really trying to get out. And that's the key point where it was ahead of its time. Like, people weren't having the conversations they needed to have. You're trying to create the environment for it, but it was still just like teasing people out to have those chats, if that makes sense, those conversations, and get to the big topics that really need approaching.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, people only change when the pain of staying where they are is greater than the pain of change. So, you know, we have had this period up until 2020 where it's like, it's not too bad. It's not bad enough to jump ship, is it? But it's like we're now entering a period where we don't know if it's going to be bad enough to jump ship, and it looks like it might be, right? So you get this thing. But the point that I think the idea of what we were doing at Link for Growth is not necessarily to promote Link. Link for Growth is just an idea. It's an idea, and an idea that could work. But there are loads of other ideas that also could work. But what we have to do is almost like the Link 4, the number 4, was about different types of growth. So you've got personal growth in the you're learning all the time and you're growing more wisdom and more knowledge as a fact of being here, and focusing on picking up a book and reading stuff about how you operate and why you operate the way you do. And then you've got your network, i.e. your personal connectivity to other people. That can grow when you go out and you meet people, and it can end up being, you know, quite a large influential network who are doing different things. I've got different types of networks. And then you've got the third level of growth, which is whatever your endeavor is, it's growing it, building it, and making it happen. And then you've got the community, which is where you live, and helping that to become a better and more enjoyable place to live, and the people in it benefiting from whatever you're doing and your contribution, and them also contributing. So it's not just one layer of growth; it's a multifaceted growth. And I think what I also want to sort of communicate is that it doesn't matter. People talk about being awoke. Oh, they're not even awake. You know, like, we need more awoke people. More people that know what's going on in the world, and then we can really make a difference. But I think they're missing the point there. There are enough people who kind of get it, enough people who who want to create something different, because what we've got is that people are killing themselves, and they're hanging themselves, and they're killing themselves at the moment, and that can't be good. Something's not right when people are doing that. So I think there are enough people already that kind of get this, and it doesn't really matter where you are in the spectrum of either being half dead, i.e. you're worse than not awoke, you're like not, you're still sleeping and you're like almost dying, all the way up to people who are fully consciously aware of what's going on and like almost enlightened. If you take the whole spectrum, people are somewhere in there, somewhere, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter where they are, because it doesn't matter where you are, you can contribute in some shape or form. It might be that you're just an absolute profiteering, egotistical, money-making machine, right? Well, that's fine, because you can create some money, you can contribute that. We don't even have to like you. But we
Yeah.
know you're good at that. So if that is it, then just do that. Then that's all right. That's fine. We're happy with that. You might be someone who you only have to be one step ahead of somebody else, don't you, to be able to teach them something.
Yeah.
Often to be able to learn something from you. So if we all move in a common direction, we're all helping each other go up. And it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you want to end up that's important. But we can all help each other. And I think people say, oh no, this club is for the group of people that are awake. Well, how the hell do you expect anybody else to wake up if you just keep it as a secret club? You've
True.
got to, through osmosis, be part of the community. I mean, I'm not a sort of religious fanatic or anything, but you take Jesus, he didn't go into the synagogues and preach to the synagogue. He went up a mountain and he pulled people who knew nothing about anything towards him. And so he said, these are the people that need to learn, not the people who are already going to church, even though he had to go at them as well. But he said, it's the people that don't know that need to learn. It's not the people that already know. They're already in the club, aren't they?
You're preaching to the converted, otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not about conversion either. It's about appreciating where people are and just gently pointing out, a bit of the statement, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. But of course, the teacher can be any one of us in society. And I know this for a fact, I can learn from you just as you can learn from me. And we can all learn from each other because we've all got different life experiences. So anybody can be a teacher. We just have to want to grow.
Yeah. Well, I think
But
that's the important point of being open to that collaboration. And again, I feel like I'm being mean on the oldies, but I don't mean it in a bad way. But I know from my parents' generation talking down to us, it was a case of, well, that scene in Matilda where like the dad sort of says to the girl, I'm big, you're small, I'm right, you're wrong. And it's a case of there was that mindset that if you've been in the workforce for 5 years and I've been in the workforce for 50 years, my idea must be best. So just shut up and listen, little man. That was kind of how it was, like going into the workforce. And I think it needs that, you say like awoke, it needs that awareness that the 18-year-old student can bring something big to the table. It's not, and the misconception, which I think leads to a lot of the apathy and a lot of the the lack of inspiration, is a case of, right, I've got this big vision, bearing in mind the longer I live, the more out of date I'm getting, and there's people older than me, so whatever I envisage is getting out of date because I just can't keep up with the times. Yet these youngsters come into the workforce and it's like, right, I've got some great ideas. I can see how it's going. I'm part of this generation. I'm part of this movement. I know exactly what you need. And then someone obviously 50 years their senior is like, well, the plan's written, mate. You're just here for fresh blood. You just got to step in line and you got to do what you're told. And it's like, yeah, but I can see there's a bit of a problem here with a vision. Hang on a minute. I've been doing this for 50 years longer than you've been alive. Step in line. And I think the key point of what you're saying when you come to collaborate is really that openness to collaborate and really get the best out of all the resources available. And, going back to the old fashioned networking approach, someone might come in and go, right, my business would work great with an accountant, any accountants here, and it's like, well, there's no accountants here. Well, there's no one here I want to speak to. But that's not actually how it is. Like, there's some really important conversations available to all of us from a whole huge spectrum of sources that maybe at first we didn't realize it was a conversation we needed to have, if that makes sense. And I think it's accepting, and you put it quite perfectly, like you can learn from anyone. And I think more of us need to have that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think when you take the younger generation, I think it requires an openness by the older generation, an openness and a willingness. And the older you get, the longer it takes to keep current, because you know, maybe you're getting a bit slower, maybe you don't grasp the ideas so readily. And you know, I spend quite a lot of time talking to young people about technology, you know, like they were using virtual reality, and I'm like, I'm going to go out and get a virtual reality headset, because you know, I'm not going to not know what they're talking about. You know, they've got these digital watches, you know, like, so I go out and I get a digital watch, not because I haven't got a watch, but because how do I know what digital watch is capable of doing unless I've got one, I've used it, and I've experienced it for myself. So, you know, for me, it's all about keeping current, because without keeping current, I don't even know what they're talking about, let alone make a comment that's half sensible.
Yeah.
And it's my job to know that, because I see myself as a connector between the generations. You know, I can talk in all of the languages that they speak. You know, I'm not quite so good on the abbreviations that some of the grandchildren use, but you know, I'd be frightening my peers if I was using that type of stuff. But
All the acronyms coming out.
yeah, but I think it's important to, because I see the older generation as the ones that are going to help the younger generation to create the world that they're going to spend longer in.
Yep.
And that's my duty, because our generation have raped and pillaged the planet. We've created a population of the planet of billions of people, which is much quicker than it would have done through our overconsumption of the world's resources. So we've basically spent our grandchildren's legacy already with our greed. Because we were so greedy, we want to make money, we just consumed everything we got out, like a bunch of locusts. We just consumed everything in our path. And of course, now we've poisoned the planet, we've spent all the resources, and we've created this massive bubble whose only future is to burst.
Oh, great.
You know,
Selling a dream here, Chris.
yeah, but what I'm saying is that we messed up. And it's no good saying I'm all right, Jack. As far as I'm concerned, it's like, okay, well, you know, we've done this, and we were almost like petulant teenagers going around doing whatever we want, bugging everybody else, and now we've got to sort of like 21-year-olds. We've got the keys of the door, and it's like, oh, I got to live in this mess I've created, and it's a bit of a mess. So some people are going to go, oh, it's all right, I got the money, I'll pay a cleaner. And other people are going to go, well, actually, I feel a bit guilty about this. Not guilty in the word that we know, but I feel responsible for assisting those that come next in helping to make sure this never happens again, and that actually people are happy. And I think if we get this right, and we get the mix of people right, we can create a fantastic future. So I'm very positive about the future. I just know that we're going to go through quite a few years of pain before we
There's
get
some
there.
teething errors first, isn't there? And again,
And
going back to that collaboration and openness, it's having that, because I've got this sort of quote that I repeat a lot. It's not mine. It's winners create and losers compete. And it was part of the mindset that was wrong about the old-fashioned networking, because it used to be a case of, right, I've signed up to this group, here's my membership for the year. What can I get out of it? Like, what am I going to get from the group? So, like, I don't mind putting stuff in if they pay for it. I mean, you're like, I'll give you a lead if you give me a lead. And it comes from that sort of competitive mindset of, well, like lack and poverty creates that competitive mindset. I don't think people realize that. Most people, like, who are obsessed with the hustle, they think they're winning. And I think, well, no, the hustle comes from a lack mindset, competitiveness. And it's like, well, if you collaborate and you live in that world of abundance and you sort of create together, there's so much more available. And one of the massive paradigms that I can see from your vision and your idea is the fact that the older generation, one of their biggest assets is resource. And now it's a case of the younger generations coming in and saying, well, I've got a vision and a vehicle and a plan that could really benefit from that resource. And then you got the older generations going, oh, I've worked for this. I've worked my entire life. This is mine. I deserve this. And you can't really knock them for thinking that way because, you know, to all intents and purposes, they're right. It's taken them their life to get all that together, if that makes sense. And now someone's come with the idea of, if we used your resource and shared in the collaboration of things, now that's going to be a massive mind shift, isn't it, for the older generation?
Oh, it could be, but what I don't think you need to do. There's a lot of philanthropic people out there. There's people out there with millions who just want to see it go to something which they can have a statue, you know, hopefully not have the head cut off, but a statue which will stand there as a legacy for their contribution to society. Now, I know there are, everybody that becomes a prime minister wants to be known as the best prime minister. Yeah, they want to leave a legacy that they did something of real value and they're remembered for it. And so there are going to be people out there that are going to want to contribute because they want that legacy. There's going to be other people out there that want to contribute just because they know they can and they feel they've got value to offer, and they realize that you can't take it with you. So, you know, it all either goes up in smoke or they put it to a good cause. It's not going to be everyone, Dean. It's not going to be everyone at all, but there's going to be enough that want to. And I think it's just getting to those people and saying, you know, I don't want to. I said to my kids, I said, you know, we've just sorted out my mum's house. So 60 years of stuff. I said, you know, I want to just, when I go, is just give you the walking stick and the robe I'm wearing and say, right, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, that's all was left.
That's all that's left.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, that's, for me, it would be great because, you know, everything else has been redeployed back in the cycle of life elsewhere for value. You know, like that's what better way to go, really.
And what a legacy. You know,
Yeah.
Again, I guess people worry about, you know, what's my legacy going to be? But the legacy for generations moving forward is in what we do, I think. Like, not just in what, you know, fighting for the news headline or fighting for the title or fighting for the statue. It's your actions is your legacy.
When you get to be my age, you know, in a few years' time, and you're helping your kids like I'm helping my kids now, you know, like I'm helping them in ways that don't involve money. They involve me giving them my time, involve me in giving them some wisdom, involved in me opening up their eyes to the options available to them that I can see, and helping them make the choice that's right for them. Yeah. And you know, that's, you can't buy that. That's not money. That's investing myself, taking myself out of my day, putting myself into their day and giving them the time they need to grow in this most important time in the world, you know, and if they need it now more than any time ever. And so that's my legacy. You know, it's not money. You can't measure it in money terms. You measure it in what, when I've gone and they're there doing what they're doing, the legacy is involved in who they've become.
Yeah. Like they're standing on the shoulders of giants. You're literally passing on, you know, like, this is what we learned. This is what I learned from a generation before, you know, now it's you guys.
Yeah.
Take it on.
Now I want that generation to be the best version of themselves they could possibly be. And that's, you know, because otherwise it's just going to go around again, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, there is huge value in the old, not just let's just have their equity at their houses. I mean, there's masses of value in the older generations, and a lot of it kind of goes out and is lost because the conversations never happen. I'm like most kids, you know, when you remember those big conversations you have with your grandparents, and you think if you'd never had those conversations, all that knowledge and all that history would have gone. You know?
Well, you know, an absolute real example of this is my mum and dad bought their house new. Right, there's 18 houses in the street, and a year, about 9 months before my mum passed away, I said, tell you what, I'm going to take you in a wheelchair, and we're going to go around the street, and I want you to tell me who were the first people who bought all these houses. So we went around the street. Number one, who was living there? Oh, that was bought by such and such, but they didn't live there very long because they left after, like a year. Oh, right, okay. And then who moved? And we went around the street, right? I recorded it on video as we went round, and that's on YouTube. Now, if I hadn't done that, all of that knowledge would have been lost.
Yep.
That's just stupidly small example, but anybody that's currently living in that street can watch that video.
Yeah, absolutely. But stuff like that is really interesting. But there's also a lot of things that people learn over the years that, let's face it, it's human nature to try and do things in a certain way.
Yeah.
And if we don't share the results of that, the next generation will go, well, we're going to have a go. And then someone's going to say, well, I could have told you 40 years ago it didn't work. I know, but you didn't tell us. You know, I mean, you left us to work it out on our own. So then it's people like, do you remember that story of the meatloaf in the oven?
No.
It's one of those coaching stories where a couple are together and the wife cuts the end of the meatloaf off and then puts it in the oven. And she does this all the time. And the husband sort of says, why do you always chop the ends off? I mean, like, it looks perfectly good to me, but you always chop it off. And the girl says, well, that's what my mum always did. So I just learnt cooking from her. And they said, well, let's phone your mum up and find out why. So they phones up mum. They said, why did you chop the ends off the meatloaf? And the mother says, I don't know. That's what my mother always did. So I just, followed in suit. So lucky for them, the granny was still alive. So they phone up granny and they say, why did you always chop the ends off the meatloaf? And she goes, oh, that's simple. My oven was too small. It wouldn't fit in otherwise.
I've heard a different kind of story.
but it's just one of those examples of how much sort of goes down through the generations, and you don't
unquestioning.
It's unquestioned, and if you don't collaborate and you don't share ideas and you don't share knowledge and experience, and all this stuff will just end up repeating itself because you don't know better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, so that's really my ideas. It's an inverse pyramid. You've got the young people at the top. You've got the middle section, the middle age, the kind of people who are the workhorse of the current economy, and then you've got at the bottom, you've got the smaller group of who it's not like that. It's a bit like that shape, really, but
a bit like me, those.
Yeah. but it is like that because at the end, at the bottom, you've only got a certain percentage of people that are prepared to even, like you were saying, the dad 65 or whatever, and he says, I can retire, and you get to my age, you can retire. I don't. People speak to me about pensions, and I say, "We're talking about pensions. I'm never retiring." They say, "Well, what about giving up your work and what you do?" I said, "Why would I do that? That's called my life. I do what I love. Why would I want to give that up?"
Well, I would say I'd like the option to retire.
Yeah, but I would retire doing this.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, we'll get a life out of the work we do, and I think it's human nature to want to keep working. I think, like in the old-fashioned thing, you don't want to be working for something you don't believe in, right? So when I say the option to retire, it's that option where you're not forced into doing work you don't want to do because you just have to do it for the money.
That's the point. It's like I've got 7 or 8 things that I do, maybe even more, but every single one of them I choose to do, and I choose to do them in the amount and time that I want to do them with whoever it is that I'm working with. No one tells me when I'm doing them or what I'm doing. I just do them when I feel like it. But yeah, and I think that's retirement, isn't it? But
absolutely.
Well, I can still earn money, and I can still, I'm still doing that. So it's not like I've given up work, whatever that is to people. But I don't work for other people, and I don't get told when I got to go and do stuff.
Well, we covered quite a bit there, but I think Link for Growth, for people who've never heard of it, like prior to this podcast, and they want to find out more about it, how can they learn about Link for Growth?
Well, you could go to a website called uk.linkforgrowth.org, uk.link4growth.org, and you can find out some stuff there. But we are reworking the website at the moment because with what's going on in the world and the changes, we need to update it with change the message a bit, not change it away from what it was, but update it, because the reason Link for Growth exists is because of the problems we're now experiencing, and consequently it's almost like we were forecasters before, now it's actually happening. So so we've got to now sort of adjust it. But if you go there and you go there in a month's time, it'll be different, but it'll be probably, well, it will be better, and it'll be absolutely on the money for where we are today. So.
But that's just the site, though. If you get involved in obviously some of the events and some of the projects that you're actively promoting, the idea is to get people in those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can access the information and get in contact via the website. Yeah, everything that you would need to find out more and get connected, you can do via that website. So
Yep.
just that really.
I think you're right though. It was a little bit ahead of its time because we've seen with, working remotely, nowhere's inaccessible now. You can work from home and you can service the world, and you can do business other ends of the globe. And I think that became part of our psyche, that the world is expanding and getting
Yeah.
smaller at the same time, if that makes sense. But I think recent events and what's happened with the COVID-19, I do think that sense of community is coming back, because we spent so much time doing business with China and doing a few deals with Australia and sort of expanding our reach using the web. I do think we lost a bit of community because we was kind of thinking bigger afield.
Well,
That
definitely.
won't change, but I think the rise of the community is going to be a massive
Well,
benefit, I
I
think.
think that just to finish really, but the real reason for that isn't that we got all global. It's we got greedy and we stopped believing that we needed other people in our lives, because all it took was a bit of money and we could get anything done. Well, of course, if money becomes an issue, you take away that. And what's happening now through COVID-19 is the thing people have missed most isn't the next armchair. It's the inability to go give our closest, dearest, nearest and dearest a hug.
Yes.
And I think that has really woken people up to the fact that what's most important in our lives is people and relationships, not money, because they haven't been able to go out and spend any money. So it's like it's changed things. And not for everyone. I'm not saying this, but like I said, not everybody does these things at the same time, and that's all right. But there are going to be a good number of people who are going to go, I'm never going back to the way it was.
Yep. And you touched on it quite rightly there. Like if you've got an income, you've got money coming in, you can always just buy what you want, but there are jobs being affected. There is the economy being affected. There's a lot going on in the financial world, and there'll be points where it's not so easy just to buy what you want. However, with a bit of collaboration, everything's available.
Well, when people come to me and they've got a new project and they say to me, Chris, where can we get funding for this project? I say, here's a better one. How can I do this project without any money?
Different question. I bet that gets a nice little pause at the end of it.
It does, but
you can hear the cogs ticking.
Yeah, but it's so fundamental, because you go to ask money, you've got a paymaster, you've got a controller.
Yeah.
If you do it without any money, you've just got some collaborators who you can build a relationship with. One builds a community, one destroys it.
Absolutely. And sometimes investment's the right thing, sometimes it's the wrong thing, and sometimes you're just not aware of your options. So
Yeah.
So fantastic. Link for growth. And also you're quite prolific as an individual on social media. Do you have any channels out there people can follow so they can learn more about your ideas and opinions?
Well, if they follow me, or they friend me up on Facebook, or I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on pretty much everything.
Yeah.
My name's Chris Ogle.
Just staying hip with the generations. You've got your TikTok, you've got your videos pumping out on Snapchat.
Well, I'm not on TikTok at the moment, but I'm on. But if you just look for Chris Ogle, and there's a really good-looking young model called Chris Ogle. That isn't me. Scroll down past that one, and you'll find me.
I'm gonna have to look now. No, I'm not. That's quite a funny little story. so yeah, thanks ever so much for jumping on the show. It's a huge topic, and I know we kind of just skimmed the surface of it. But if you're open to it, maybe we'll discuss it further again in future, because there's so many facets to that, and it is important to get the collaboration going. So thanks again. Follow Chris Ogle, Ogle. All the usual channels, and link for growth. .biz, is that right?
No, it's UK.
.org.
Well, linkforgrowth.org. Don't forget that, uk.linkforgrowth.org. It's got UK at the front because, of course, it could go into other countries without any problem. So we've done that way.
No, we'll add all the links to the show notes as well. And again, thanks ever so much for your time.
You're welcome. Take care.
Look after yourself, Chris.
Yes, you too.